Well, hey everyone, my name is Nathan Jones, and if you're new here, welcome. I just talk about all things movies, specifically Blu-rays, and today we are talking about the second half of my ABC Movie Challenge, where I'm going through the letters of the alphabet, going from letters N all the way up to Z today. But if you're unaware of this challenge, I started a few videos ago, near the beginning of April, I believe, is when, I don't know if my timeline's correct on that one, but I started this challenge because I started noticing that I was going through my collection of watching unwatched movies, and I was kind of going in alphabetical order, so I decided to make it a challenge. And so I decided to choose 26 films in my collection, starting with the letter A all the way up to the letter Z, and kind of going through there and filling in the gaps and watching movies that I haven't seen that have been sitting on my shelf for quite some time, some of them for even a couple years. Now, obviously, with this challenge, I extended it to you who's watching this now. And, I'm sure there are some letters that might be tricky, like X or Q. Letters like that might have films in your collection that you might have seen before, and that's okay. That you can watch those, or maybe you don't have anything in your collection that has any of those letters. So just find something on a streaming service, or try to do your best to fulfill that missing letter, right? But I didn't really have any strict rules about this, but I just thought this was going to be a fun challenge because really we're just trying to watch movies that have been sitting around for a bit and kind of giving us some structure. And I really like that aspect of this challenge. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And also, just a heads up, there was a giveaway in my last video and the video before when I did it with Raquel Stecher. There's two giveaways, and I'll be doing a separate video on those. So after this one, I will be doing that, and we'll focus a little bit more on that. And so if you haven't checked out those videos, talking about the one with Raquel was talking about my 100 Years of Movie series, talking about the 1930s. We talked about our favorite film from the 30s, our favorite films, plural, of the 30s, and she did a little giveaway with the movie Bachelor Mother. So go check that out if you can in the description down below. And then in my last video, I did a Blu-ray haul like I always do near the end of the month, and I did a little challenge where I have a few titles that I'm going to be giving away. Definitely look at those titles and see what you're interested in. So also check out that video. So let's jump into the letters N through Z today. And we're going to talk about each film and the movies that I picked for this ABC Movie Challenge. What about you? What did you watch for the ABC Movie Challenge? I know some of you are still in the thicket of it. Some of you have already done and maybe doing a second round of it. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm super excited to hear what you chose for this challenge. Let's jump into the letter N. All right, for the first letter, I chose a Criterion. This is actually Spine number 7, so it's one of the early Blu-rays from Criterion, and it is from 1958 and is directed by Roy Ward Baker, who I know from Hammer films, and I also just recently watched Inferno in 3D. Really liked that movie, so I was actually kind of happy that I accidentally kind of chose this movie when I was just looking around in my collection, and I chose it. And I'm talking about A Night to Remember. And this is on the sinking of the Titanic that happened in 1912. And 1958, it's not that long after this accident that happened. I mean, it's, some decades have been removed, obviously. But, the last time I really interacted with the Titanic was watching Titanic back in the late 90s with Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio. And it's been so long since I've seen that movie, I haven't seen it with adult eyes. Now, watching A Night to Remember really sparked my interest back in the Titanic and making me think, I want to watch that movie again. So I'm going to watch Titanic, probably by James Cameron, sometime in the near future. But A Night to Remember, directed by Roy Ward Baker, was a fantastic, fantastic drama telling of the story of the Titanic, which obviously sank, a real-life event that happened. And the sinking, I guess them hitting the iceberg happens fairly early on in the film, and seeing everyone's reactions to it was really, really interesting. Now, obviously, the women and children were saved first, put in the lifeboats away from the ship that was sinking, and different characters acted different ways. Some people hysterically, some people just took to the bottle. It's all over the place in this movie, and I actually think this is really, really well done. I think the acting is superb in this movie. There's nobody I terribly recognize, particularly in this film, just off the top of my head, but I thought I really enjoyed it, and I definitely would recommend this movie to anybody who is interested in history, but also interested in the time period and of the historical event that happened, because I think this is a really well done film that I think with the production side of things was just stunning. And I honestly think this is probably one of Roy Ward Baker's best movies that he's did, like objectively, right? But yeah, A Night to Remember. Have any of you seen it? I'm definitely curious. Down in the comment section down below. Let's move on to the letter O. All right, so we're moving to Japan, to 1964, in a psychological horror film of sorts. A film by Keneto Shindo, I hope I said his name correctly. And I'm talking about Onibaba. And Onibaba is really, it's like the demoness, right? It's about a female demon, right? And there's two females in this particular film that are our main characters, who are luring Ronin and I guess fleeing samurai into this hole, into this pit, in this these long tall grass fields that they are like hiding out in, and they're like kind of leading them to their death. That's all I really want to say about it, because it's certainly a movie that like you need to watch. It's, like I said, it's psychological. It's really experimental in the sexuality that is being portrayed in this, because I think it got past the Japanese censors during the time, which I think is really, really interesting. But it really is a terrifying film, and I think the climax is just really, really well done. Yeah, but this is from Eureka Masters of Cinema, so this is a Region B, and this is the version that I have. So if you don't have a Region A player, you can't get this, or if you have an All Regions player, you can definitely get it. But yeah, this is spy number 55 from Eureka. But Onibaba is certainly a movie that you need to watch. I've been kind of holding off since like last October was when I wanted to watch it, kind of around the Halloween period, but I was finally able to watch it with this challenge, and I'm super excited that I did, because Onibaba was definitely one of my favorite movies of the 26 that I found, that I watched, and certainly check it out if you haven't seen it. All right, let's move on to the letter P. All right, so for the letter P, we are talking about a Warner Archive from 1970, so we're going up in years, right, to a film with Mick Jagger, and also Mick Jagger. I'm talking about Performance, and that's actually on the front. Mick Jagger and Mick Jagger right here. Performance is really trippy. It's definitely a product of its time, I want to say, from 1970. It feels like or I guess a pre-Guy Ritchie film mixed with like an acid trip. It's really strange. Honestly, I probably need to watch it again. It's a film that I didn't really take to the first time that I've seen this, because obviously it's the one time I've seen it. It's a film that like I feel like you need to know a little bit about the culture of the time period, and also a little bit more about England. And so I didn't really pick up on everything that was going on in the film, but it's certainly culturally relevant to what was going on around the time period. But yeah, I'm actually kind of curious what everyone thought of this movie. If you've seen Performance, it's certainly experimental, and there's a lot of really crazy things in it. There's a lot of things that I really like about it, but at the same time, it might be one of the weirder choices that I had for this challenge, and it's definitely one that I might have to rewatch later on in life. I don't exactly know. But yeah, I enjoyed Performance, but probably not as much as the other films that I did in this collection of films that I chose. But yeah, if any of you seen Performance, let me know in the comment section down below. All right, let's move on to the letter Q. All right, so we're getting on to the letter Q, one of the really hard letters to fulfill a film for, but I found a really good one from 2006. And it's a film that really is weird to think about, because this movie from 2006 is really talking about the 90s, because of this event that happened with Princess Diana. I'm talking about the Queen right here. And so right here we have Helen Mirren as the Queen. She does a really phenomenal job in this movie. Michael Sheen plays, why can't I think of his name? It's literally right there. The Prime Minister. Goodness gracious. I'm blanking right now. Obviously, the Prime Minister of England during the 90s that would be involved with George Bush later on, and the name is literally just escaping me. But like I said, Michael Sheen's in it, James Cromwell's in it, Alex Jennings, Roger Allam, Sylvia Sims, just a really fantastic cast in this one. And I certainly would recommend this one, because, like I said, it's the politics of the 90s that are going on with the death of Diane, and really kind of seeing the aristocracy kind of crumbling, and like trying to figure out how separated they are from the people of England, and really seeing that unfold. And it really is interesting, because this movie interlinks some actual footage from like television at the time period with the movie itself, and I think they do it really, really well. And I think that the performances are just really, really phenomenal. In fact, I believe that This had some nominations, obviously, but yeah, certainly check this movie out if you haven't seen The Queen. It's worth your time, and I think it's relatively cheap. And it's one that like my eyes were glued to the screen like the entire time, and I definitely was not bored at any of it. And I thought that it was handling a real event that happened really, really well, and really kind of showed you all these different angles on it. So I think they did a really good job with it. All right, so now we're going to move on to the letter R, to a epic film of epic people that really aren't talked about. All right, so this is an epic film, like I kind of alluded to, from 1983, directed by Philip Kaufman, and I'm talking about The Right Stuff. Also, I used to be a double VHS because of the length of the film. I think it's like it's almost like over 3 hours long. I don't have the time off the top of my head, but it is a really crazy movie. It's about the people who were like the test pilots before we went into space, right? And so these are all test pilots who just kind of run the gamut and just really love speed and kind of all those really crazy things you would see in like Death Valley and the stunt people, right? Doing all these things, eventually getting the go-ahead by NASA, who are like looking out for people to test these space shuttles, and really kind of seeing that journey alongside all these men who really aren't talked about much. And so this is a film that I know was a really big thing in the 80s, and a film that was on a lot of people's minds and radar, which I think is really interesting that it's kind of not really talked about much now. And it's certainly a really great film with a really phenomenal cast. Like listen, we have Charles Frank, Scott Glenn, Ed Harris, Lance Henriksen, Scott Pollan, Dennis Quaid, Sam Shepard, Fred Ward, Kim Stanley, Barbara Hershey, Veronica Cartwright, Pamela Reed, and yeah, Bill Conti does the music. It's just really a really great kind of a biopic of the time period and of all these people who were involved in, this, like I said, really uncredited people who were like a part of like the first space program that really were trying to beat the Soviet Union, trying to get to space. Sputnik just got, the satellite just got put up there. So they're like, okay, now what are we going to do? We're going to send a monkey into space, or we're going to send these guys into space. And that's something that they grappled with in this movie too. And I thought the performances were just really, really well done and a knockout of the park. If you haven't seen The Right Stuff and you have a lot of time on your hands, certainly do this. You do yourself a favor and watch this movie. I broke it into chunks because it's a long movie, and I definitely wanted to kind of take it all in different times. And so you can definitely feel the length a little bit, but I think, like I said, if you break it down, I think it's worth your time, and definitely a great, great film that's not really talked about much today. So that is my choice for the letter R. All right, so now we're moving on to the letter S, and I had a lot of movies to choose from this one, but this is the one that kind of was like, I was eyeing for a bit. I can't explain why, but I did. It's directed by George Romero, and it is from 1972, so I think this is like his third movie that he did, because it was not that long after, Night of the Living Dead, which is definitely still my favorite film by him. But I'm talking about a movie that really is not talked about much, but also is a really weird one because it has multiple titles. But the title that I have is Season of the Witch. And this is actually from Arrow Video right here. And this movie, like I said, is very interesting. It's filmed as Jack's wife and then eventually retitled Hungry Wives. But eventually Season of the Witch became what it is now. And this is really not as scary as you would think it was, hence the name Season of the Witch. It's almost like a sexploitation film, or at least more of like a domestic drama of a woman going through this traumatic thing, and really just being very paranoid about things going on. I was definitely a little underwhelmed by this movie. Thinking about George Romero, obviously we think zombie films, and we think of those films that he would direct in that vein. And so definitely when I was going into this one, I was like, okay, what would this movie really kind of be about? And it really is about like that domestic struggle and that paranoia that you get around the time period in 1972, which I guess it would maybe fall more along the lines of like a Nicholas Roeg type of film in some sense, I suppose. But yeah, I was definitely a little underwhelmed, like I said, with Season of the Witch. There's a lot of really cool things going on, and a lot of really cool shots, and a really interesting setups, and I thought it was definitely really interesting. Like the opening sequence is really trippy. But like I said, it's something that I would have to rewatch again. It's definitely not my favorite film that I've seen out of all these movies, but Season of the Witch is definitely worth your time for like at least a visit. So I definitely say check it out if you haven't seen it. But yeah, let me know if you've seen Season of the Witch down below, and let me know what you think. Definitely wasn't my favorite, but it could be somebody else's. Who knows? All right, now we're going to move on to the letter T. All right, so we're moving on to the letter T, to a silent film from 1924, and this is an epic, and I fucking love this movie. This movie was great. I had such a fun time watching this movie. It's 149 minutes, so it's about 2.5 hours long, and it's so much fun. And I'm talking about Douglas Fairbanks in The Thief of Baghdad. Oh my goodness. Raoul Walsh directed this film, and yeah, Douglas Fairbanks has just got such an energy to him. I haven't seen any of the other films he's done. Now, obviously, this is like a prototype to like Errol Flynn instances, but man, oh man, are these films fun. And like there's prototypes to like Ray Harryhausen effects and King Kong and something like this, and like even like Metropolis that would come a little bit later for Fritz Lang. There's like some Art Deco stuff going on mixed in with just really crazy expressionist art and really extravagant designs, and I don't know, I was just really blown away by it, and I really loved the score in this film. And this actually, let me actually figure this out real quick. This is actually the maestro Carl Davis conducted the Philharmonia Orchestra, doing the score of his own music with the Ortelia of Rimsky-Korsakov. I probably butchered like hell. I think, which is like the original score of this film. So I think actually really like this edition of it. This is from Cohen Film Collection right here, and I really love this movie. If you haven't seen The Thief of Baghdad, this is like one of the best silent films that I've seen, and I just watched it. I can just say that it's so much fun. If you think like, I guess there is like an idea of like, okay, silent films, not much going on, that you can't really latch on to dialogue so much, but it's really into like the acting and the set design and really just everything involved with the score and like the movement and the acting. There's just so much involved with this, and the camera as well, and like just how the camera plays with the scene. And I think it's really interesting seeing this movie and having such a blast watching this movie. I think that's definitely a plus for this movie. It's definitely one of my favorites of the bunch that I've seen. But yeah, Thief of Baghdad, do yourself a favor, watch this movie. I know there's one in the 40s with Sabu in it. Haven't seen that one, but I definitely really enjoyed this one right here. And definitely check this movie out if you haven't seen it. It's definitely worth your time. All right, so now we're moving on to the letter U, to a war film about submarines and like German U-boats. And actually, this is a film that I did not know had Matthew McConaughey in it, and Harvey Keitel, and even Bon Jovi in it as well. And I'm talking about U571. This is an old Blu-ray, as you can tell by its design. I really enjoyed this movie. It's a really great war film about a submarine, obviously trying to decode the German U-boats that were sinking pretty much all of the Allied ships around the English Channel and really just blocking off the Atlantic. And I think this is a really interesting kind of like, we got to get this, we got to get these secret codes from this submarine that's kind of an SOSing other ones, and like we got to sneak in as another German U-boat and try to get those coordinates down, and it kind of just ensues from there. And it's just like one of those action adventure films that you'd get from the year 2000. But I had a really good time with it. I think this was just a really great drama and really great acting overall, like by Bon Jovi, right, of all people. And I was really surprised by the amount of like how interested I was in this story. But I also really love war films, and so like I might have a natural bias in that regard. But yeah, U571, it's not a movie that I hear talked about much, and I definitely have heard about it for a while. I've had it on my shelf for a bit, but I certainly was able to watch it now, and I'm very pleased that I did. It's not got like the best rating ever. It's like around, I think, 67% or something. 6 out of 6 or 7 out of 10 from IMDb or something like that. But it's definitely a fun movie, and if you like war films, I would certainly check this one out if you haven't seen it, because it's definitely worth your time. U571, have you seen that film? Let's move on to the letter V. All right, so now we're moving on to the letter V, to a film from 2015, and it's all shot in one take. and it's about one night, and it's involving one person and her journey and on that night and how crazy it goes. It goes in a lot of directions. But I'm talking about the movie Victoria. And Victoria is obviously centered around her, Victoria. She is from Spain, and she's actually visiting Berlin. So it's a night in Germany. She finds these four dudes kind of near the beginning of the movie. She's just exiting a nightclub and then kind of sticks around with them, and things go crazy. And that's all I'm going to say about this movie. But like I said, it's a one-shot film, really about like the late night into the early morning and the direction everything goes with her, like that one night, and how amazing really all this was pulled off. I thought this was an insane thing that it was pulled off in that one take. It's almost 3 hours long. This is a movie that definitely doesn't have any dull moments, even though I will say the people in this movie, I don't want to be around these people. Just like hanging out just like usual, because they stress me out and give me anxiety just being around them in general. I'm talking about Victoria and all the people she meets. Definitely something to watch in a film. Not so much live in a life for myself. I would definitely not do this. But anyway, that's all I'm going to say about this movie. Certainly check this one out if you haven't seen it. It's really incredible. Like I said, the camera work and just like the way the direction of the story goes and the acting in it involved is just like, I don't know, it's incredible that they pulled this off like this. They must have rehearsed it a lot, I would assume. But yeah, certainly check out Victoria. If you have not seen that film, I would definitely do yourself a favor and do it. Let's actually move on to the letter W. All right, so now we're on to a Western from 1969, directed by Sam Peckinpah, and it's a movie that has been unfortunately sitting on my shelf for a while, and it's definitely one of the legendary Westerns from the time period. It's like that turn of the like decade, and also turn of like the type of Westerns you would see going forward. And I'm talking about Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch. And this has William Holden in it, Ernst Borgnine, Robert Ryan, Edmund O'Brien, Warren Oates, Jamie Sanchez, and Ben Johnson. And man, oh man, these guys definitely not very likable. And it's also known pretty well known for its violence and its depiction of it. And yeah, it's really hard to latch on to these people who are really definitely, like at the very beginning of the movie, they're on one of their last robberies. This is like in the, let's see, 1990. Let's see, hold on a second. I'm trying to figure out when it kind of started, what the time period was. It was like the early 1900s, so it was nearing the end of the Wild Wild West kind of period, and they're trying to assimilate into the culture a little bit. Automobiles had just like started off a little bit, and they're really kind of just aged bandits, and they're trying to kind of do their like last job, and then they get double crossed by an old partner, and then that's kind of where the story ensues. They travel to Mexico, and Mexico is dealing with their politics and their problems that they're issuing with right over the border, and it kind of just goes from there. I'm sure a lot of people have seen this movie, and I'm definitely late to the party here, so I don't really have much to add, but I'm really happy that I watched The Wild Bunch, because it is really about a bunch of people that, in the name, it's just a bunch of unlikable people. There are some characters in this that I like. There are like flourishes of like, okay, wow, like I can actually respect you as a person in what you're doing. But it really is about all these people kind of dealing with the situation and growing up with the time period and like figuring out what's going on, and all in this lawless land that's starting to get law a little bit more and a little bit tighter. So it's really interesting to watch, and I'd certainly say check it out if you haven't seen it. And it's also one of the longer films that I watched in this journey, but I had a really good time with it, and I definitely am excited to watch more Westerns now because of it. All right, so next we're going to move on to the letter X, another film, another letter that was really hard to come up with the title. All right, so the letter X, I only had really one option, and the option actually was from Hammer Films. And so I have a feeling that I'll talk about it a little bit later when I start doing my Hammer journey. remember I have a missing Hammer Indicator box set over here. That's actually like a preview of what I'm going to be doing next. I'm going to be watching those films. But this is actually from 1957. It's one of the early Hammer films, and it is directed by Leslie Norman and produced by Anthony Hines and written, of course, by Jimmy Sangster. And right here I'm talking about X the Unknown. It's starring Gene Jagger, with Edward Chapman as well. It's a sci-fi film, and it's about a lot of like this unknown substance that's kind of just came from like the center of the earth and is really kind of mysteriously destroying people. And it's really, really interesting. I am a huge fan of sci-fi films, and I am getting interested more and more in these types of films. And it's definitely a film that like is more of like boardrooms and like scientists trying to figure out what's going on. Less on the action because probably for budget reasons, but there are really cool sequences in this movie as well, with really great acting as well. Like I said, with kind of the focus on the dialogue in this movie, but it definitely fits into that Cold War paranoia that's going on around the time period, and it definitely has like a British sensibility to it. And yeah, it's a Hammer film, so I'm super excited that I was able to watch it. And this is a Scream Factory edition right here, so it has some really cool special features as well that I'll probably check out later once I do more of a Hammer journey. But this is the letter I chose for the letter X, and it was unknown, so I couldn't really figure it out. That was my lame joke. Let's move it to the letter Y. All right, so for the letter Y, I chose a film from the year 2000, and this is certainly one of my favorite films that I watched, and I was so happy that I was doing this challenge and I saw it at the letter Y, and I was like, okay, I'm super ready for this. It's an Edward Yang film, and I've only seen Brighter Summer Day from Edward Yang, and I love that film, and I've only seen it once, and I've only seen this movie once, and I'm talking about Yi. Wow, this movie is incredible. That's all I can really say initially about it. It's almost 3 hours long. It's about families and lives and like neighbors and like the intersections of all those things and how they're interacting with each other. All right, so the camera cut off. But I was talking about Yi, and I was talking about how this movie really starts off with a wedding and this celebration, kind of has some hectic moments in the very beginning as well, and then it ends with a funeral. And you see all that stuff that's in between. A lot of these people's lives really don't really interact with each other, but there's consequences within each of the characters' actions about the circumstances that are happening with all the different people involved in the movie. And it's just, I think it's really, really wonderfully done. It's really kind of centered around two of the kids. It centers around them the most, but also pretty much everybody in this movie has like a centerpiece attached to them, or at least they're connected to the main characters in some regard. And I just really love how it's all set up, and how it all comes and continues on, right? That's the brilliant things about films like this, is like, their lives continue and you're still interested in like what those circumstances are. And I don't know, I'm in love with films that are kind of like an in-between kind of a film that like starts off in the middle of something and you kind of have to figure out between like what the characters are doing and their interactions, and then like, seeing that spot in their life and then realizing like you want to see more of that later on. But obviously this is the story is around this particular part of their lives. And Yi is just such a phenomenal film. Man, certainly one of my favorite films in this challenge. And if you haven't seen this, is from the Criterion Collection. Certainly worth your time, and that picture speaks, 1,000 words. All I have to say about that. So yeah, let's actually move on to the last letter of the alphabet, the letter Z. All right, so for the letter Z, I kind of cheated because I remember watching this a few years ago, but it didn't really stick with me when I did watch it. But I finally picked it up when Twilight Time was going away. But I definitely wanted to watch it and revisit it and like kind of get fresh thoughts on it. So I kind of cheated a little bit with this one on the unwatched, but I had a good time choosing it, and I talked about Woody Allen in Zelig. And, there's all the different Zelig spellings, and that's like the original poster for this film. So this film came out in 1983, so early 80s. So Woody Allen kind of at the height of his powers. And really, I really like this movie. It's like a documentary, like the newsreels from like, the early 1900s, and like, That's how it's shot, and like recreations of actual historical events that Woody Allen puts himself in. It's really about this guy Leonard Zelig, who's like a chameleon, blending into all these different time periods and around all these different people, and he could literally change his skin color and his tone, and also the type of person he's around, because he was just so nervous. So it's really about like, it's like a documentary, like a mockumentary of sorts about that, mixed in with like them trying to cure him and like becoming a person. And it's got so much to say, and also it's just silly, as you would expect a Woody Allen film to be. And I'm not super familiar with a lot of Woody Allen films. I'm actually still fairly new to his filmography, and I definitely want to watch it for sure. But Zelig, it's a movie that I really enjoyed, and I actually think this is really creative. It's such, like, you don't really see movies like this made, and also just the way that it was created. Like I said, splicing real, like, actual footage with recreations, and also putting himself in these things. Really fascinating and really interesting, and I think he did a really good job of balancing like a serious and silly tone, and I think he did a really good job with it. So if you haven't seen Zelig, I definitely do yourself a favor. I believe this is probably streaming somewhere, but yeah, because I believe this is probably out of print, hard to find. But yeah, that was the letters that I chose, from the letters N all the way up to letter Z. What about you? What did you choose for those letters? Are you still doing the ABC Movie Challenge? I'm curious to know down in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. It's a little longer than I wanted it to be, but I'm happy that I was able to get through with it and to go through this challenge. It was a blast. I really had a good time, and I definitely will see myself doing something like this in the near future. Thank you so much for watching this video. Subscribe, hit the notification bell. Don't forget to comment down below, and I will see you all next time. I'm not jonesing around.